You're listening to The White Rabbit, conversations on the art of presenting in a rather noisy world. Your hosts are Matt Krause and Alper Rozanes. Matt helps leaders of international companies speak, write, and present with confidence. Alper is a communications trainer and a startup investor with a diverse portfolio of companies in Barcelona. If you like this podcast, please share it with friends and colleagues. Now, on to Matt and Alper for today's conversation.
Alper, in today's episode, we're going to punch some holes in some favorite punching bag subjects of ours. And when we started
I cannot think of a better way to start the day.
When we started to make the list of things to punch holes in, the list quickly became very long. And so we're only going to have time for the first couple items. And subsequent episodes will be completely dedicated to other subjects. We started out, and just at the beginning, just right off the top of our heads, we immediately came up with punching holes in images, punching holes in various popular slides, the welcome slide, the question slide, the thank you slide, punching holes in the 70%, punching holes in Toastmasters. So we're
yes, this could go on.
Yeah, the list could go on forever, and then we would just sound like angry old men. So we're just going to
grumpy old men.
Yeah, grumpy old men punching holes in everything that ever existed. So
we're just like a pair of dinosaurs. Okay, yeah, that sounds good.
So we're just going to limit it to the first two things, and let's start out with talking about images. I assume that we're talking about using images in our presentations, like using images on slides and stuff.
Yes.
Like that. Is that right? Okay.
Yes.
So I've got some thoughts on that. You tell me what you think about images on slides.
Sure. Let's go.
Okay. Go for it. You start.
Well, I like how there is all this talk about, when you include images, it will increase the retention rate. It will resonate more with the audience, which I completely agree, by the way. I'm not punching holes in that.
Okay.
But I believe, just like almost everything else in life, not all images are created equal. I mean, usually if you hit me with the first Google Images result from the web on a particular topic that you're talking about, chances are you're going to end up with an overly cliche standard stock image of what was the song's name? Shiny Happy People, something like that.
Yeah, Shiny. You're talking about the REM song, right?
The REM song, yeah. You're going to end up with these white background photos with shiny happy people smiling in them, literally.
Yeah.
So we can punch holes in that kind of images forever, because not only I think it's cliche, but at the same time, obviously it's fake. And it's, in my personal opinion, it brings this sense of fakeness and a lack of preparation into the presentation.
Yeah, and
especially when you show teams of generic people working on a presentation, everybody's so interested looking at the screen like they're seeing it for the first time, or they're looking at the most interesting thing in their lives. And I believe it hardly represents the real life. So that's the kind of images that I can punch holes in.
Yeah, and we talked about this a little on a recent episode, that stock photography is more than just stock photography. Stock photography is also trust. And if you use an image, you're searching through stock photography and you find an image that maybe you like a lot, but everybody else looks at it and realizes that this is a fake representation of reality. And then all of a sudden they stop trusting you, and you're standing up there in front of the room and people aren't trusting you anymore. And it's all because of your stock photography.
That's a good point. Yeah.
One of the things that I am wary of about images, and this isn't an inherent problem with images, it's just something that I think people should be warned about, is that images are great for many of the reasons that you mentioned much earlier. The people retain images better. People, respond to images more emotionally. Blah blah blah. I totally agree with all these things. But one of the dangers of images is that they leave a lot open to interpretation. or they allow your audience to make interpretations that maybe aren't yours. Like for example, you might be putting together, a slide about your company, and you put one of those shiny happy faces slides on your presentation, and you might be thinking this is a representation of how energetic people are to work at our company, how happy they are to work at our company. But somebody else might look at that slide and say, well, in that slide, there's only one person wearing a hard hat, and there are 10 people in total. So, only 10% of the people are wearing hard hats, and this company hates blue collar workers, or this company hates safety laws, or something like that. And so what your audience member is thinking is completely different than what you're thinking. And if you put that image on the slide because you wanted the image to do the talking, maybe what the audience hears isn't going to be at all what you intended. So I think that images need to have an asterisk next to them. They're good, but
that's a good point.
Yeah, they're good, but they're open to misinterpretation.
And when you think about it, the way to remedy that is pretty easy, actually. Just go and get a picture of your people in the company. I mean, even if you take out your cell phone, especially these days, just shoot for 2 minutes, couple of shots from the company. I think they would serve much better to your message instead of using just some of those standard stock images. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, and you might be sitting there in your office working on your PowerPoint presentation and thinking that this picture of my company is not as pretty. The lighting isn't as good, the people aren't as handsome, the clothes aren't as nice. But your audience, they're going to cut you a lot of slack, basically. They might be looking at your slide and thinking, that's not the prettiest image that I ever saw, but it's a real image. I can trust this person. I can trust this person, and I can trust that image. So shall we continue with images, or shall we move on to the next subject?
I think we will be beating a dead horse if we continued. I think the position is pretty clear on that one.
Okay.
What about those slides that you mentioned? What do you mean by them?
Yeah, the welcome slide. These are the typical slides that you see in so many presentations. There's the welcome slide, and then at the end there's the question slide or the Q&A slide, and then at the very end there's the thank you slide. So
the horrible thank you slide.
Should we start with one of them, or do you want to do all three?
You go ahead. I'll take the thank you slide. One of my pet peeves.
Okay. I'll mention one of my pet peeves with the question slide, because I am not a fan of the question slide at all. When you're doing your presentation, often the question slide, obviously will come towards the end, and it'll often be like the last or the second to last slide or something like that, and it'll say Q&A, and then the speaker asks the room, are there any questions? And then there's dead silence, and it's uncomfortable.
Dead silence, yes.
So, and it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable for the speaker. It's uncomfortable for the audience. The audience is thinking, I should be saying something, and yes, I have questions, so there's a lot going on in people's minds. But in terms of communication, it's just dead silence. And so, I think that it's much more important to cultivate questions throughout the presentation, so that people they ask questions about slide 1 and slide 2 and slide 3 and slide 4, and they're not just saving up all of their questions for the very end when this Q&A slide comes up and there's this uncomfortable dead silence in the room. I think it's much better for the energy and the audience creativity and the creativity of the questions, and for encouraging conversation, two-way conversation. I think it's much better if you find a way to pepper the questions throughout the presentation.
I completely agree with that. And when you were talking about it, I remember distinctly finding myself in that situation, in that situation of dead silence for several times in my life before I gave up the habit of asking, so are there questions?
Yeah.
I completely agree with that. You can just derail a 45 minutes, otherwise relatively good speech in a matter of seconds, and they will look at you, you will look at them. It's going to be probably one of the most uncomfortable experiences in life. and I completely agree with the idea of dispersing the questions throughout the presentation. At the same time, I'm thinking that there could be a way to maneuver towards the end of the presentation if there will be a Q&A session. What I had to come up with to avoid that silence was, instead of asking at the end of my speech, so are there any questions? And just waiting for miracles to happen, I now make a declaration that my speech or my presentation has ended, but I will stick around for any questions that the audience might have.
Okay.
And instead of just looking at them like deer in the headlights, I usually start moving towards my laptop in an attempt to convey the image that, hey, if you have questions, you're more than welcome. Otherwise, I'll just move towards picking up my stuff. And usually at that point, someone jumps in and I'm back to 100% alert and I run the Q&A session. But yes, I have had my fair share of those uncomfortable silences. I'm never going back to that one again.
That's a great suggestion that you just made, to moving towards your laptop, because there's something about thinking, from the audience perspective, they're thinking, this guy who was up here speaking, we're about to lose him. I better ask my question now or I might lose him forever. So that motion of moving towards your laptop would totally provoke whatever questions are laying out there dormant, people would start asking them.
Yeah, unless we bore them to death, in which case they will be pretty happy.
Yeah,
they will be pretty happy to see us leave.
If we bore them to death, then we have bigger problems. And on that subject of boring them to death, let's move on to, you said that you wanted to talk about the thank you slide. What would you like to say about the thank you slide?
Well, what I realize, this is almost in all the presentations, not all, but most of the presentations end with this, literally the words thank you or whatever language you're presenting in. And then people are looking at an empty slide with the words thank you. Sometimes I fantasize about audience members flashing out large cards saying you're welcome or something like that.
I would love to see that.
But aside from that, I think there is a big opportunity being missed in this case, which is usually that thank you slide can be followed by a long commentary section or a Q&A from the audience. And that slide will remain on display for longer than probably any other slide that you use in the presentation previously, which contained valuable information or charts, data, or anything. So my recommendation is, don't put the words thank you on this last slide. Instead, put the main message that you have been talking about during the entire presentation. Think of it like a billboard. Hey, I made my presentation. Now we can run a Q&A, we can run commentary or whatever, but that slide that's going to remain behind me or on display will include my core message, which I took half an hour trying to explain to you. And that will be in the eyes of people, in front of people. And I think it would increase the probability of retaining what you just finished telling them for, how long ever the presentation was.
Okay.
So I think we're losing a great opportunity by just putting the words thank you there instead of the main message that we talked about.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Okay, so we're running up on our time limit, but we've barely put a dent in our list of things that we would like to talk about, list of our pet peeves. So we'll definitely have to.
I was not under the illusion that we would get everything covered. You and I have much more than that.
I think our comments on Toastmasters, that alone is going to take up an entire episode. So
several episodes.
Yeah, I was thinking we
You're optimistic.
We could make an entire year out of our comments about Toastmasters. So okay, but anyway, so we're going to stop here for today, and then we'll pick up with future episodes. All right, so thank you very much,
let's
Alper.
do that.
Talk to you later.
Talk to you later.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to The White Rabbit with Matt Krause and Alper Rozanes. You can subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, iTunes, or through your favorite feed.